of the things that worries me, again, getting back to the whole democracy thing, is not that we have crazy presidents. You know, the founding fathers figured that we would have crazy presidents at some point, and presidents who would try to be authoritarian and do things and not abide by the Constitution. But they always thought that Congress would be there. So to me, what's not so egregious about this whole thing is Trump or, you know, Marjorie Taylor Greene or Matt Gaetz or any of those other nut jobs. It's the Rob Portmans, it's the Susan Collinses, it's the Mitt Romneys, it's the Ben Sasses, it's the Lisa Murkowskis, it's the so-called adults in the room. They're just sitting around and doing nothing, even though you ask them privately, yes, this is really a problem. Yes, our democracy is under threat. You know, and sometimes I think a lot of what I consider pragmatic conservatives like you are even afraid to speak out about it because, you know, it is a risk, and you can not be totally anti-Trump and acknowledge what's going on. So I really love to get your thoughts on that, because that's what concerns me, one of the most pressing issues on this whole threat to democracy.
Well, again, I guess it's a question of what do you mean by threat to democracy? If you mean Congress people spouting off about things, is that a threat to democracy? Well, that's what Congress people do. They spout off. They're notorious for doing, you know, producing gas. So I don't think that, I think the words threat to democracy are thrown around too carelessly. I think words matter. And just like the, you know, democracy dies in darkness, the motto of the Washington Post, I think that is hyperbolic and incendiary. I think that rather than really understanding why Trump won, the establishment left and the center left and center right, sort of the elites of society, they didn't really take the time to understand. What they did instead was to just reflexively knee-jerk do everything they could to say orange man bad, rather than really understanding why did he win and how can we make sure that we actually bring people together. I didn't really see any of that happening, maybe for like a week or two at the very beginning of the Trump term. So I just think that if the systems are completely not talking with each other, that is a huge problem. And I think just isolating the fringe characters on the right without understanding how they got to be there is a problem, because otherwise the concerns they have, some of the concerns are very valid, but the way they talk about them are just unacceptable and again hyperbolic. But I really try to always pivot to policy. That is usually the way that I try to think about what's happening. I really want to, and I think that's what Youngkin did so well, because he didn't get dragged down into the conspiracy theory gutter. And I think that anytime you allow the loudest voice in the room just for the sake of being loud to have impact, that's a problem. And I think that what's interesting, a good example on the left of countering this, just like Youngkin is a good example on the right, is Joe Manchin. So even though the most hyperbolic, flame-throwing, intimidating, people trying to harass him and Kristen Sinema, he held to his policy, to his standards. He said, I have problems with the price tag. I have problems with the lack of means testing. He really stuck to the policy. And I think that resonates with a lot of people. And it certainly resonates with the people of West Virginia. He's doing way better than Congress and Chuck Schumer and the National Democrats are in West Virginia. So his seat is safe. And so to me, that's how I think about how do we move forward and how do we acknowledge legitimate grievances without getting dragged down into the gutter of the rhetoric.
Well, we've kind of gone off on several tangents here, but let me respond to each of them if I may. First of all, your response was basically about the 2016 election. I was talking about the 2020 election, but to respond to that, okay, Trump has been the divider in chief. I think once he was elected, because people thought, one of the reasons he was elected was a lot of Republicans thought he was a moderate, the most moderate candidate since Eisenhower. And that's one of the ways that he peeled off votes. And so I think a lot of people were optimistic. Okay, this guy says he's a businessman, but he was nothing but the divider in chief. He was president of his base, not of the American people. So if you want to place the blame for division, look at how it started. look when it started. You look at every stat, you look at every study. It started in 2017. But going back to getting along and all that, I do believe that yes. And again, one of the reasons we don't get along is because now you have people that can't agree on the same facts. And again, when did that start? I'm the kind of guy that is not orange man is all bad. I give Trump credit for the things he did. I give him credit for the vaccine. I give him credit for getting more people involved, even though it might have been out of enmity, not adulation. I give him credit for doing some good work in the Middle East. There were some good things he did. All right. And again, growing up in New York, you may not respect Donald Trump, but you can't hate him because he was always entertaining, right? He may have been a con man, but he was our con man. So I'm not, I am, again, as a policy guy, but you look at all these problems that you mentioned, they all started under him. And I just think, yes, have they gotten worse? Yes. Have the Democrats contributed? Yes. Are they terrible in a lot of ways in terms of not working and going way to the left, blowing an opportunity? I mean, all Biden had to do was not be Trump, have incremental change so people feel that their lives are getting better, and just make people think, you know what, there's a sane person or two governing. But that hasn't happened. He's gone way to the left. He tried to be the next FDR with no mandate and no governing majority. So yes, but still, look where all this started. It was during Mr. Orange Man. Well, I shouldn't say started, but where it really took it off to the next level. But I'll give you the last word.
Well, I can agree with you on Joe Biden and the lack of mandate. So let's agree on that.
All right. Great session, Carrie, as always. We're kickoff 2022 with always a spirited debate. And darn it, we're a model for the rest of the country. I wish more people would follow in our suits. So that wraps it up for this episode of Practically Political. Once again, Happy New Year, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.
See you there, and make sure to follow us on social media. Happy New Year, everybody.